Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our special series of the Ayurvedic Woman. This series is of for women, for their health, for overall happiness. But I first want to also welcome all the men who are here. It's something to be really appreciative of, that men have taken this initiative to understand how this goes. And we're just going to wait a little bit for everybody to come. Until then, I'll brief you a little bit about myself. My name is Venu, and I have the pleasure of being your host for today and tomorrow's session with Mary Thompson. And by now you already know who Mary Thompson is. I mean, she's one of the best teachers of Ayurveda that you could find, and it's not me who's saying that. You'll get a chance to see other people tell you what an experience it is to learn from Mary, and you yourself are going to experience it within a few moments. I'd just like to tell you a little bit more about her. She has 19 years of experience, and she's received the Charak Award for Excellence. But, apart from her achievements, apart from her academic accolades, there's something very, very inspirational. And personally, I think that every woman, every person, I think, must really know what she did in her life, because it just makes you believe that, this is possible. And it's not possible from some external source. It is something that you can do yourself. So you'll get a chance to watch Mary's true story shortly right after the webinar. They'll make sure that you can access the video, and I personally request you to definitely watch it. Hi, Mary. How do you feel about this with so many people up here? A lot of people have signed up for these sessions, I must tell you.
Oh, I'm very excited to be here. I'm excited about the product we put together. And I'm just excited to be able to spread more knowledge about Ayurveda and how women can use it for health. I think it's just something everybody needs to know.
Yes, thank you so much. We're really honored to have all of you here, and I think we should right away begin with the Ayurvedic perspective to women's health. What does Ayurveda have to say about it?
Well, the Ayurvedic perspective view of health is that you are capable of being healthy. I think so much of our society pulls us towards disease. We chase things that we want to taste or see or touch or feel, and we don't always pay attention to how does that balance our body. And Ayurveda is a way that really invites us to come back into relationship with our body. It invites us to come back and see, did this taste help me? Did it help me to feel more balanced? Did it help me to have less stress in my life? Or did it create a new problem that I now need something to do to fix that problem? I think so often we chase sensations, and Ayurveda just reminds you that, get into the body and feel what your life feels like, and does it feel healthy? So Ayurveda's view of women's health is that all people, women and men, have everything they need through their diet, through their lifestyle, to be healthy. And when we step out of health, when we step away from health, we can use the tools of Ayurveda, whether it's through herbs or through recommendations for diet lifestyle, to bring ourselves back. Sometimes I had a student one time say to me that Ayurveda had too many rules, and I went away and I thought, wow, that's really interesting. And I came back and I said, I don't think it's Ayurveda that has the rules. I think it's your body, and Ayurveda just gives us a way to figure out what those rules are. And if I pay attention, I come back into health. So I think Ayurveda's view of women's health is that women can generate health through their diet and lifestyle. The woman is like the center, and then when she generates health, she brings health to her family, health to her community, and health to the world. So there's just no stopping, There's no stopping women when they're working from a healthy space. They begin to show effect everywhere.
Great. So when it comes to reproductive health, now, we have a lot of symptoms. We undergo a lot of different kinds of experiences which men may or may not regularly go through. How do we know that it is something wrong with the reproductive system and not with something else? What are the symptoms we should watch out for?
Okay. One of the things to think about is hundreds, thousands of years ago, there weren't reproductive challenges that we have today. Women experience infertility issues much more commonly now than they would have done at the time the Charaka Samhita, one of the main texts of Ayurveda. When that was written, there were less stresses, there were less things that would throw women's hormones off. And so we can look at those things, the hormonal imbalance that we experience. A gross expression of this might be through infertility. But every month when the period's coming, do we think PMS is a normal thing? Premenstrual syndrome is that experience of mental or emotional or physical distress that we might get before the period. Your body has everything it needs to handle those hormones, unless we're doing something that might interfere with that. So if we're experiencing symptoms before our period, then we know there's something we're doing that might be impacting our body's ability to tolerate that hormonal shift. When we look at menstruation itself, it should be able to move through without any problem at all. With our digestion, for example, I challenge people that I shouldn't be aware of where food is in my system when I'm digesting, if I'm digesting well. In my reproductive system, I shouldn't be aware necessarily of where I am in my cycle, because I would have no symptom to tell me that I have a problem. And so if I'm experiencing cramping pain or heavy flow that's very intense, or my periods go on for a long time, then I know that there is something that's happening in my body that's creating that. And so every month I get a window into my female health, and I get a window into what's happening here. And I would say the way I know that it's located in my reproductive system and not somewhere else in the body is that it kind of circles around that time of the month. What's happening a few days before my period gives me a window into what's happening with my hormones. What's happening during my period lets me know what's happening in my uterus, what's happening with the formation of the tissue, and that's going to give me a clue about reproductive health. Apart from that, I can kind of infer that if I'm out of balance in my digestive system, I begin to create an imbalance in my body that can spill into all the tissues of the body. So I start there, bring balance into one system, and begin to bring balance into the next and the next. If my challenge is in the reproductive system, I need to create balance through the whole body to bring balance there. If my goal is fertility, if my goal is conception, then I really have a very strong desire to create balance in the whole body, because I can't just conceive, I then have to carry all the way to term. And so I want to create as much health as I can, so that not only do I create the perfect egg for this little baby that I'm going to create, but I also create the perfect nest for the baby to land. So I think women's health and reproductive health specifically, I can look at the regularity of my cycle or the ease of my cycle to let me know the state of balance in that reproductive system.
So you said we need to take care of the first system and the next and the next. What is this system that we need to take care of, and what is Ayurveda's take on this? You know, modern science explains everything in terms of hormones, and it's mostly the game of, you know, it's progesterone and estrogen, and these are the two words that basically that come to most women. And I don't know if we really understand what goes on out there, but this is just the explanation we give ourselves, and we're like, okay, this is what it is. Then we take, you know, medication, we take contraceptives or something or the other to balance things out. But does Ayurveda have a unique explanation of what is going on inside us?
Well, I think Ayurveda always has a unique explanation. From the West, we might get stuck. So often in the West, we chase the symptom. My cycle is irregular. Okay, we're going to start regulating hormones by taking some kind of external hormone. Or my menses is painful. Okay, let's take birth control so we stop the menses so that we don't have the pain. From an Ayurvedic standpoint, stopping the symptom isn't going to fix the problem. It stops the experience of the discomfort, but it doesn't stop me from bringing that challenge from my reproductive system. It doesn't stop the imbalance happening. From an Ayurvedic perspective, the digestive system is the first system we have to balance. And we have to balance the digestive system in order to balance my reproductive system. At my digestive system, I can create balance in all the tissues of the body because I regulate the nutrition I'm bringing in. I regulate if I'm bringing toxicity into the body. You mentioned estrogen and progesterone. Estrogen and progesterone are hormones, which I talk a lot about in the program, but these are produced at the ovaries. But they're regulated also by my liver. If my liver is disturbed because I keep bringing junk to it from my digestive system, then it's not going to do a good job of managing those hormones. So from an Ayurvedic standpoint, I take care of my digestive system and I begin to clear any toxicity out of the plasma, out of the blood, support the liver so that now the hormonal system can work more. I was going to put more better, but it can work better. When we look at another system that's involved here with the hormonal system has to do with how we tolerate stress. When our body is under stress, we use that progesterone in order to build more hormone to help balance the stress called cortisol. So if we're under stress, we're robbing ourselves of that progesterone, which drives us to those symptoms of PMS. And it drives us into these symptoms of problems with our menstruation. So by looking from an Ayurveda, we're going to look both at what's happening in the physical body by starting in the digestive system and what we're eating and what we're digesting, and also what's happening in the subtle body, that mind and emotions. Are we generating balance and health, or are we kind of moving faster than our legs can carry us, generating stress? So Ayurveda looks at this not as just a single approach. It's not just the physical body, and it's never just address the symptom. It's both the mind and the physical body working together, and it's not about necessarily addressing the symptom. It's let's eradicate the cause of the imbalance so that the body will take care of the symptom itself. We'll no longer have a reason for the symptom to exist.
So Ayurveda talks about the body tissue system, the 7 dhatus that you speak in depth about. For the common person who's hearing of it for the first time, it comes across as something very new. What is this whole explanation there? What is that? What is the system of the 7 dhatus?
Okay, the word dhatu means tissue, or it's taken to mean tissue, and each of the tissues of the body is present all throughout the body. One of the tissues is of the plasma. Now, it's not just the plasma, but it's all the fluids that the body produces that provide nourishment. For the female reproductive system, this has to do with the endometrium, the lining of the uterus. So when we look at women's health, reproductive health, we have to consider how healthy is this plasma? How healthy is this? It's called rasa. How healthy is the rasa? If I have too much of it, my period is too long. If I have too much heat there, my period is too intense. If I have too little of it, my period is too scanty. These would be the indications of what's happening in the uterus, in that endometrial lining. So I can use that quality of menstrual flow to reflect back. Another tissue is of the blood, and the blood brings invigoration. It brings life to every cell in the body. If I'm feeling lethargic or sluggish, maybe I'm not carrying enough oxygen in through the blood. I'm not enlivening my body. Maybe I'm hypervigorated. Maybe I'm super focused and hyper-driven. And that's going to burn me out. So maybe I've got too much heat in the blood. So when we look at these tissues, we begin to assess, is vata impacting it? For those people that don't know Ayurveda, vata is like it breaks things down. If I have too much vata in a tissue, the tissue's broken down and I'm exhausted. And I'm looking for something, somewhere, to help me feel better. If I have too much pitta, too much heat in any of these dhatus, it burns them up. And so now I feel all overly heated in my body, and I begin to break my tissues down. If I have kapha, which is that energetic of building, I have too much tissue, and now I've got kind of this stagnation and sluggishness. So with the tissues of the body, they become the locations that we go out of balance. In the female reproductive system, we see the first tissue, the rasa, we see that in the endometrium, in the menstrual fluid itself. The second, in the blood, well, we see that in the woman's health and vitality and her coloration and her invigoration in her life. The tissue of the muscle, the mamsa, is about the quality of the uterus itself, the flesh of the body. Is it strong? Is it going to provide a good, healthy nest? with the fats of the body. It's called Meta. The Meta Dhatu provides insulation. It holds enough water in the body. It keeps us warm enough. And, of course, it shows up in every cell. So we look at this, and for female reproductive system, this provides kind of a protective layer, an insulating layer around the womb. We have bone tissue. Our bones show a great role in pregnancy because we have to get denser and stronger bones to carry the extra weight. The nerve tissue, Maj Dhatu, makes up the nervous system, and this is very deeply impacted with women as they go through their monthly cycle. Our nerves bring us to balance, or they bring us to agitation. And then the last is our shukra, and that is the egg itself or the sperm itself, that which is going to become the child. So when we look at, from an Ayurvedic perspective, getting ready for conception, bringing that reproductive system to a state of optimal health, we bring each of those individual Dhatu layers to a state of optimal health. If we have a Vata imbalance, we need to nourish all of these Dhatu layers and strengthen them. If we have a Pitta imbalance, we need to cool them all down. If it's a Kapha imbalance, we need to reduce some of the excess stagnation we're carrying in there. So the Dhatu system, the tissue systems of the body, is where we look to see symptoms. And it's also where we treat to bring the body back into balance.
So, we have a lot of, that reminds me of some questions that people have sent in, and we have a lot of very interesting questions come up. So there are concerns about perimenopause and menopause also. So like you just said, that the body, these tissue systems prepare you for fertilization. The same system also prepares you for the cessation of the possibility of fertilization, which is menopause. What does Ayurveda have to talk about perimenopause and menopause?
This is really interesting because just like menstruation should happen free of symptom, menopause as well should be just the cessation of menses. The only shift that has really occurred in a woman's body at menopause is that she no longer produces estrogen. Well, and progesterone as well, because that's its partner. But the reason we produced progesterone and estrogen was to get the body ready for pregnancy. Since there's no more getting the body ready for pregnancy, we shouldn't need to have any symptoms because we simply no longer produce the estrogen and progesterone. But what happens is we become habituated to the idea that we've got this estrogen in our system, and the estrogen does things, right? The estrogen builds tissue. It builds the quality of all these tissues we are looking at. And what is amazing to most women when they're going through perimenopause is the idea that you can do the work of the estrogen yourself. You can feed those tissue layers, and your body can support and build new tissue. One of the things that we do is make sure we're feeding that first layer, the plasma, and then we make sure we're feeding the second layer, the blood, and we're feeding that layer of the muscle. Oftentimes, when we have estrogen during our reproductive years and our estrogen is high, the body has a hormonal message as to how to build tissue. What we have to do in perimenopause and menopause is create that demand ourselves. And it's done through exercise, and it's done through activity, and some very specific ones that we can do to help improve the quality of the tissues of our body. This was one of the things that it really excited me about this program, was that it talked not just about reproductive health, but also perimenopause and menopausal health. And I really felt like I was obligated to share this information with women because I had PMS, I had uncomfortable menses, I had challenges to my reproduction, and I've gone through menopause. And I remember the time when I was sitting on an airplane, I was flying down to South America, and I had a hot flash. And it was a bad hot flash. I was sweating and I was uncomfortable, and you're in an airplane seat, there's nothing you could do. And I thought, this can't be happening. I practice Ayurveda. I am an Ayurvedic educator. I am not going to have hot flashes. And I began to really search for ways to not go through menopause with a huge list of symptoms. And I found my answer always came back to building that first tissue, making sure I had enough fluid in the body, because if I carried those fluids through to each of the individual tissue layers, each tissue layer was fed. And I've managed to be, I'm now about 5 years menopausal, my skin still has tone, I still have a lot of moisture in my body, and I think it really comes back to how Ayurveda prepared me for that lack of estrogen. And so that's what I felt was really exciting about doing the part of this program that's menopausal health, was about seeing all the tools that I used to make sure that I could maintain muscle tone and skin tone and moisture in the body as I've aged.
So I'll just, explain a little bit to people the program that you're referring to. It's a great pleasure, and I must say it's an honor for the Ayurveda experience to get a chance to, share this program by Mary Thompson on the Ayurvedic Woman. So essentially, this program is a 3-part program which talks about, Ayurveda and introduction in general. Then the first part is about menstrual, your menstrual health during your years of fertility, and the last part is about menopause. And we have some questions here about the routine for menopause, the perimenopause, and dealing with symptoms. How not to PMS, how not to gain a lot of weight, how to deal with depression, anxiety. Every single thing is in there in the program. And if any of you would like to learn more about it, I would suggest you can see you can see an image on the right. You can click there and go and check the program out. Apart from that, Mary just mentioned that she went through hot flash and she went through difficulties. She also went through something not just physically traumatizing, but something which can be very emotionally taxing also. And she's gotten over it. She's a real person of action. And I would just request you to definitely watch her story. It will give you another perspective to your own health and your own, reproductive efficiency. Now, before we take up the questions, there are so many questions, Mary. I think the other half of this session is probably going to go in just answering those questions. But before we go there, there's one very, very critical point, but usually it is not given so much importance, and that is why I want to raise it today. How important is it to be conscious of the need to prepare yourself for menopause in good time, and why should we prepare from today, regardless of our age?
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the things, I refer to this in the program as resting on our estrogen, that estrogen drives you to build tissue. It forces you to build tissue. And when we go through menopause, it's almost as if you pull the rug out from underneath you. If you haven't prepared your body for menopause, then when the estrogen is gone, you suffer the consequences. Your skin becomes dry, your muscle tone is shot, you feel cold, you feel too hot, you can't sleep, you gain weight, your hair falls out, hair grows. I always think the hair that falls out of your head shows up in different places. It's like, oh my gosh, all of a sudden things are shifting. And when we prepare for menopause, what that means is we take over the job of the estrogen. We don't take over the job of menopause. It does its own thing. We take over the job of estrogen, which means we end up feeding and creating demand for different tissues. For example, our bone tissue. It's commonly known that menopausal women struggle more with osteopenia and osteoporosis. This is a loss of bone density because they no longer have the hormonal message for the body to put mineral into bone and make the bones denser. Every month during your reproductive years, the estrogen tells your body to put mineral into bone. The message is you could get pregnant. You could be carrying 50% more weight pretty quickly, and so it wants you to be strong enough to do that. So now the woman goes through menopause. The estrogen disappears. Her body says, well, we were waiting for the estrogen to tell us to put mineral into bone, and we don't know what to do, and the bones become weaker and weaker and weaker. So what can we do? Well, we can say, when the body has more alkaline food, a more plant-based diet, we have more minerals coming in, and the hormonal message that the body receives is store these minerals in the bone. So we can look at our diet and say, is my diet mineral rich? Is my diet going to create alkalinity in my system so that my body wants to store these minerals in the bone? I can then look and say, how do I tell my body that I need my bones to be stronger? Well, I do that with what they call weight-bearing exercise, yoga asana, walking, dancing, doing anything that moves the body where you carry your own weight. So when I say that I have to do the job of the estrogen, it means that I have to consider, how do I feed this tissue? And I look at my diet. And then I have to ask, how do I create a demand for this tissue? And then I do those activities. Because the estrogen that was doing it for me for all those years is gone. So when I like women to prepare for menopause, it means in their 30s and early 40s, they start to think about, how can I build healthier tissue in my body? How am I feeding myself? Because most of the women I talk to who experience menopausal symptoms never thought about menopause until it hit them. And oftentimes, I've sat around with my girlfriends, and it's almost like it was a trick of some sort. Nobody told me about the dryness. Nobody told me about the menopausal belly. Nobody told me about more facial hair. It's almost like a secret that women are keeping. And it doesn't have to be. We don't have to go through these kind of symptoms when we pay attention to what's coming. So often with Ayurveda, it's that proactivity where you look ahead and say, what's coming up? How can I address it? One of the lines I used very often was, the power's in your hands. You have the power in your hands to create health, and you have the power in your mind to look forward and see what it is, where are my challenges coming from, and how can I address those challenges? For women who are not yet menopausal, they know what's coming. There was an author one time, her name is Susan Weed, and someone asked her what herbs they could take for menopause. And she responded with, what herbs did you take for puberty? When children are going through puberty, we expect their bodies to change. We expect to see differences. And so we don't worry so much when we see those changes happen. For women going through menopause, we want to hang on to that youth. And the way we hang on to youth, in my view, in the view of Ayurveda, is not by replacing the missing estrogen, but rather by taking control of the job estrogen was doing, which was maintaining the youthful quality of the tissues. And we do that with diet and with activity.
I think one critical point to note here is the fact that there needs to be a shift in our approach to menopause. It's not a disease, or it's not a, it's not a condition which is unnatural. We've got to anticipate it, and we've got to embrace it, and we've got to plan accordingly. And this brings me to the next step, which is, so, we're a world of we're living in a time of instant gratification, and we have this problem, we should, take this injection and sort this out, or we have that problem, we should just, quickly shut the symptom off. In such cases, a lot of doctors recommend, and a lot of women, because we don't have time and we need to resort to ultimately take things like biomedical hormones, or, sometimes there are different external agents that we depend on for our health. What does Ayurveda have to say about that?
Well, I'll tell you first what I say about that, because when I've been faced with a woman, there was one woman I was talking to, and she was having horrible, horrible hot flashes, so much so that she couldn't sleep at night. She would come into work with 3 or 4 outfits because she might sweat through an outfit. And we talked about what she could do to alleviate hot flashes, but it wasn't fast enough for her. And so what she did, and this is, I support people with this if they feel they need to do it, was she went on some bioidentical hormones for a short time while she put into place Ayurvedic protocols around diet and exercise and started rebuilding the dhatus, so that she was able to come off those bioidentical hormones in a very short period of time. Usually, if someone's in a crisis point, they may need some level of acute care. And I don't like to shame anybody around needing acute care. With her, she was distraught. And so it was like, don't shame yourself. Go ahead and do that. But at the same time you do that, realize you're not treating the cause. And let's come back from an Ayurvedic perspective and address the cause of the imbalance so that you're not now attached to this medication forever, so that you're not going to have to take this and have to go through a type of menopause again when you come off it 2, 5, 10 years from now. At the time of the Charak, there was no possibility for someone to be taking hormones externally. This was 5,000 or more years ago, so it wasn't that they had factories making these. I remember talking to a woman who was traveling. She was actually traveling in, I want to say Africa, but I'm actually thinking it was in India. But she was traveling with a Bedouin tribe that was kind of nomadic. And she was asking the women about their menstrual discomfort. And the women were looking at her very oddly, and they didn't understand her question. And so she thought she must be saying something incorrectly. So she tried different words, and they kept shaking their heads saying, there is no problem, there is no problem. And she would say cramping, and they would say, no. And they would go on. And then she thought, well, what about menopause? So she talked to the older women, and she said, what happened when they went through menopause and the hot flashes and this? And the women just looked at her in wonder because they couldn't relate to her question, because it's a disease of our modern community. It's our modern society that puts us under too much stress. So Ayurveda doesn't have any specific thing they say about hormone replacement because it was never necessary. There was never a point. The cessation of menses just means you can't have children anymore. It doesn't mean you've died. It just means that part of the life is not happening. And now you have a chance to revitalize your energy for self, no longer for offspring. But you can bring in that energy to a reflective time. I was talking in class today, not about women's health, but about autumn, and that when the trees are in fall, in the season of autumn, and the color comes, the green goes, and we have the yellow and orange, it's not that the green went away, but rather the tree pulled the chlorophyll into its center. And so the tree still has that chlorophyll to bring back out into the leaves in the springtime. So with women's health, we could think we no longer have our reproductive capacity, but we still can be creative. We still have that energy that we draw in from our source that we can bring into other aspects in our life. We can use it in our creative aspect in the way we deal with our families, our communities, our jobs. Women have many years after menopause, and I would like those years to be as free of symptom as is possible. So the original question was about Ayurveda's view on hormone replacement, and modern medical practitioners have a view on hormone replacement, but Ayurveda doesn't necessarily, because there wasn't a need for it. My view is if a woman's in a crisis point, go ahead and use the tools that are available to her so she can weather that crisis, but at the same time begin to put into place things she needs to do to generate health.
Right. So we have a number of symptoms that suddenly start attacking us when we're transitioning through menopause, and that's when we realize it's menopause. So basically the problem is not really menopause, the problem is the symptoms that interfere in the everyday life. Like you rightly said, we can prevent those symptoms from happening in the first place, but if we've already reached the stage where they are interfering our lives, then what do we do?
Well, then we look at acute treatment. And acute treatment could be herbs. It could be through massage therapies. It depends upon what the specific symptom is. But let's say the symptom is weight gain that comes with menopause. So what happens for women in menopause, I go back to the estrogen. The estrogen's job was to fuel metabolism. The estrogen told your cells to metabolize faster. But now you're through menopause, the estrogen's gone, and the cells begin to metabolize more slowly. Which means if I continue to eat the same amount of food, the same amount of calories that I was eating when I still had estrogen, I'm going to gain weight. So what I have to do is be aware of the fact that my body no longer needs that high caloric demand. A woman may need 500 calories less a day after going through menopause. So it's again being aware of the body and recognize that. So one thing I can do is recognize how much supply the Dhatu needs. Do I need to put that much food in for the metabolic rate that I have? The next thing I can look at, if estrogen was driving my metabolism, how can I bring my metabolic rate up? Well, there's only one way to do that, and that's to move. And so I have to start getting my girlfriends together and going for walks or going to the gym or finding some fun ways to have my exercise become a part of my life. Every time there is a symptom of menopause, I can treat it acutely. I probably would have an herbal recommendation to support the woman too. I have herbs that can spark metabolism. But herbs are still acute treatment. It's going to be so that I can use that to support me while I put into place the diet and the lifestyle changes that I need to really make lasting change in my life. Each individual symptom has specific treatments. For some women, it's thinning of the hair, and I look at how do I feed that tissue. For some women, it's hot flashes, and I recommend, ways in which we can balance out hot flashes. And we can do it specifically with herbs. And as we regulate and we no longer demand high levels of estrogen, the body begins to stabilize and those symptoms resolve as well. So I guess it's a two-pronged answer. One is in the acute expression, when I have the symptom now, I may want to take an herb or a medicine to alleviate that symptom now, while at the same time remembering that I'm not addressing the cause. I'm simply taking away the discomfort. While I'm taking away the discomfort, I want to put into place changes in diet and lifestyle that will take away the cause of the imbalance so that I am not bound to any medication or herb for symptomatic relief.
Okay, so we've got a number of questions. I will just start with the questions, but before that, I'd like people to know that for a detailed account of, a recommended lifestyle for prevention of certain specific symptoms like cramping, PMS, or hot flashes, weight gain, vaginal dryness, of course, and loss of libido. And, there are many things that people don't commonly talk about. Even those things have been covered. They've been covered by this fantastic program by Mary. I think for every woman, it's something, it's an essential, it's just like knowing about, when you pass through school, you learn mathematics, you learn languages, you learn political science. I think this is something every woman should learn at home, herself, through parents, through teachers. This is something fundamental to know, and at any stage of life. These things have been covered by the program, and you can take a look at it by clicking on the link or the image that you'd be able to see on the right-hand side of your chat window. Also, before that, Mary, I would just like you to share your experience of creating something. What was it that really makes you so impassioned about this program?
Well, I think for me, what makes me passionate about this program is being a woman and realizing how little we're prepared for the imbalances. So often, the symptoms that we experience are looked at as normal. People make jokes about PMS. People, and I remember seeing a bumper sticker, I have PMS and a handgun. And what hurts me, not deeply, but it makes me feel sad, I guess is better than hurts me, is that woman's in pain. That woman once a month is not in control of her emotions. And if I can help anyone to resolve that kind of lack of control, I feel honor-bound to do so. Women going through like cramping, heavy menstrual flow, long-duration menses, these women are experiencing discomfort because of something that should be happening effortlessly. Our bodies should be able to have all of these things occur. When we're in a state of health, we wouldn't have that discomfort. So where I got impassioned about this was that when I had PMS, this was probably when I was about 35 years old, and I had horrible PMS, and I went in, and so immediately the OBGYN, the doctor, said, "Oh, well, you're perimenopausal." I didn't go through menopause till I was 50, so he had to be wrong, but he was so ready to excuse my symptom away as something else and want to put me on antidepressants. And when I began to correct my imbalances in my life, all those symptoms went away. Or you have menstrual discomfort, and you go into the doctor and they say, some women just have menstrual discomfort. That's just yours to live with. I can give you pain medication, but I can't give you a solution. It's so upsetting to me when we're met with a symptom in the body, And then this medical establishment that we believe in says, meh, we don't know. You just have to live with it. And then to go through menopause, and same thing, to have things happen that nobody knows why they happen. And it's a joke. People make jokes about the dryness of menopausal women, or about the emotional mood swings of menopausal women, or their lack of ability to sleep. And I just don't think it's fair. I think for me as a woman, I feel like it's unfair that our disease condition is not treated as I'm sorry, I said menopause was a disease condition, I don't want to say that. So our imbalances, our symptoms are often treated as unimportant. They're treated as funny, and we're even made to look and laugh at them ourselves in a way that we could take them. And I think that makes me sad that women often will have something and not realize that they could resolve that issue with just some little changes in their lifestyle. Because of the shifts I saw in my own life, in recovering my menstrual health, in recovering my reproductive health, and in going through menopause smoothly, I really feel obligated, and I'm excited about sharing this with other women.
Thank you so much. I think I'm again and again thanking you for this, because while I may be many years behind the experience, but I feel the necessity of such a program, and PMS is so interfering in everyday functioning, and as a woman I can really thank you for this, because this is something that someone like me would really need, and I'm sure a lot of our viewers here would also appreciate it. I just noticed that some people are having a problem with the page. They're facing an error. I would just like to suggest that the link must be up there somewhere on the right. You can try clicking on that again if you want to check out the program. Also, since today's the first day it's been made public, there's an introductory offer of 50% off on it. You can access that offer from that link on the right. Now, for the questions that people have sent in, so I'll take up some of the initial questions right from the beginning. And we had someone here who was asking about so what would you consider to be a long period of menses? So when do you say this is long? 5 days, 4 days, what is the duration?
Well, with Ayurveda, we talk about the three doshas. The Vata dosha, very short duration menses, maybe 3 days, 5 days. 3 to 5 days, very light flow. Pitta dosha has more moderate length menses typically, and so their menses might be about 4 to 6 days, kind of in there. Kapha dosha tends to have longer duration menses, but it still should be resolved between 6 and 8 days. It shouldn't go on beyond 9, 10, 11 days. If a woman's menstruating much beyond a week, the menses is lasting a little bit longer than is very comfortable for them to have that continuing for that length of time during the month. So one thing when we're looking at people, women, and menstruation, it gives us an idea of what dosha, Vata, Pitta, or Kapha is at play in their body. And so when I say long duration menses, this would typically be longer than a week.
Okay, so anything longer than a week should put us on our toes, and we should wake up to the needs of our body then. Right, so Jade here asked this question, and Jade has another point to mention. She says that after visiting a gynecologist and being told that the fibroids that I had treatment for, and I will be, I'm smiling here a little bit because Mary has some experience with that, and once you go and watch the video just as soon as the webinar ends, you will understand why, and you'll understand the complete context of it. So to complete her question, she said after the treatment, being told that the fibroids have been reduced after the treatment, but still there's no difference in the flow of her menses and the intensity of the premenstrual hormonal imbalance. What would you say in this case? What should be the next step?
Well, the premenstrual hormone imbalance is not really affected so much by the fibroids. The premenstrual syndrome has got to do with something called estrogen dominance, meaning the estrogen level is too high in relationship to the progesterone. And that's happening it could be in a number of places. It could be an ovarian thing, it could be a liver thing, and it could also be a stress thing. So the first thing, as an Ayurvedic practitioner, I would look and we'd evaluate, like, where were the stresses, and if there was some way to reduce stress during the month so that you could better manage estrogen progesterone. With the level of bleeding, this is something that fibroids can directly impact because fibroids can change the size and shape of the uterus. The larger the uterus, the more endometrium, the more bleeding. And so by reducing the size, you should see some reduction in the flow of blood. But if not, then we would look, it's kind of like doing a little mini practice. We'd look at the rasa dhatu, the tissue of the body that makes that endometrium, and we'd see why is it that we're producing so much of it. And this typically is going to be done in response to progesterone, but there might be something else at play. And so we would look and see if there's other places in your body that you're producing a lot of fluids. And if so, then we'd say, how can we reduce that fluid production to kind of minimize the amount of fluid that you're producing? So there are two different things that are going on, and I don't usually see fibroids so strongly related with PMS unless for some reason they're driving your progesterone levels down. But I can't imagine that. I'd have to do more research on that one.
But so what would you suggest should be done in this case? Would you suggest, do you think an Ayurvedic lifestyle or Ayurveda could help her in some way?
So if you were interested with fibroids, there are Ayurvedic herbs which are very specific to reduction and actual reduction and removal of fibroids from the system. And so if she worked with a practitioner, they may work with those specific herbs. Mm-hmm. Beyond that, for PMS, we'd assess levels of stress and hormone levels to see how were those being affected. Stress can interfere with hormone levels, so we'd look at stress. Liver health can interfere with hormone levels, so we'd look at liver health. And then we would look at the health of the ovaries themselves to make sure they weren't having a problem with hormonal production. And then for production of the rasa dhatu, the plasma or the fluid level that makes up the endometrium, she might work with diet and lifestyle to reduce that. So it would be typically with an Ayurvedic practice, you can do everything through diet, lifestyle, and then for acute condition like the presence of a fibroid, you can work with specific herbs that are very specific to that tissue.
So you think the lifestyle and diet recommendations for every person and every symptom will vary, right? So if you're going through vata symptoms and not pitta, then the diet that you should take should be different, and you mentioned that?
Yes, so it depends upon the dosha that's out of balance is going to make a difference as to how what's going to be most appropriate for you. When we look at Ayurveda, there is the understanding that everything is right for someone, but nothing is right for everyone. So it's sometimes difficult to answer a question on a broad level because it's a specific answer.
Right.
So the first thing we would do is, and you can do this for yourself to an extent, which is to reflect back and think of yourself, do I have more of these vata type challenges? Do I go more towards pain, anxiety, being underweight? Do I have more pitta type challenges? Do I go to more heat and intensity, maybe redness and coloration, or I feel more burning or heat in the body? Or do I go more towards kapha, where I have more challenges with sluggishness and lethargy, and maybe have a challenge with excess weight? Mm-hmm. Once we identify the dosha that's most out of balance, then you can do the diet and lifestyle that will best bring that dosha back in line. For menopausal women, and perimenopausal women are in this boat as well, we're moving towards a time of vata. Adulthood is a very pitta time. Reproductive years is a very pitta time. You get things done. You make babies, you make projects, you make a home, you make a life, and this is all going to be during pitta time. This is a time for women work, and this is a time where they're very successful. In vata time is a time to draw that energy back in, and that's where we move into in menopausal years, is we move into that vata time. It doesn't mean women can't work. It means that sometimes their focus is a little bit more reflective. Maybe they'd rather mentor younger women in workplace. Maybe they'd rather be more creative and create new occupations or create new jobs for women. So when we look at the vata time of life, we're moving into that as we move into menopause, and we take that creative aspect of our pitta years where we were creating our job and our children and turn it into a creativity which we can do to pass on to the next generation.
Okay. So there's another question here where, it's something, there are so many products available, so many options available. There are PMS creams, and there are, somebody mentions detox pearls or yoni eggs for the vagina. Are they recommended for cleansing, and how often? And she says that she's not had her menses in 4 months, negative pregnancy test, stress severely reduced, and weight gain. So what would you have to say about that? And there are some other questions also about, I'll just mention that, about having your menses after menopause.
Yes. So there's a number of different questions in there. So let me start with the first one that I remember, and I might forget halfway through and have you remind me. So first was about creams and eggs and things that you might use to offset menopausal symptoms. Again, what I said earlier is like when you have an acute symptom, if you feel like you need something to get you through the acute symptom, then there are lots of products available to you. But the treatment for the symptoms, but these products treat the symptom only, they don't eradicate the cause. So if I take a progesterone cream and that helps me to experience less menopausal symptoms, that can be fine because I don't want to experience menopausal symptoms. But at the same time, it hasn't solved the problem that I don't make progesterone anymore at my ovaries. And so what I have to do is to say, what was my progesterone doing, and how can I replace that through my diet and lifestyle? I don't want to have to go buy a progesterone cream every month. I don't want to have to put it on. And I'll tell you a secret, when I use progesterone cream, I snore. And so I don't like to use progesterone cream because I like to snore. Because progesterone loosens up all the muscles of the body. It tells all the muscles of the body to relax. And so if you relax those throat muscles, you begin to make horrible noises while you're sleeping, or so my husband tells me. And so I don't like it. And you might experience some different symptom completely if you use it, but I don't like side effects of things. So I look for how could I get that job done. So back to progesterone cream, when I'm under stress, my body uses any available progesterone to make cortisol, so I have the stress hormone. So the less stress I'm under, the more natural progesterone my body produces, the less I need the cream. But if I'm in an acute distress, go ahead and use the cream, but at the same time, I want to see how can I bring that stress level down. The next question the woman had was about lack of menses. And what she needs to find out, and why I can't answer it directly, is sometimes women have no menses because they don't produce an egg, and they have what's called amenorrhea, which means they're not. I should say, let's see the word for this. Amenorrhea is what she's experiencing, which is lack of menses. But if there's no egg being brought to maturity, there's no ovulation, and there's no reason for menstruation because there's been no egg. So there is no endometrial lining. So there are many reasons why a woman may not ovulate. Stress being one, lack of body fat is another, or there could be a hormonal imbalance. So she'd want to be able to identify which particular cause is the one that's most hers. Is there a lack of communication from the hormones from the endocrine gland in the brain? The pituitary tells the ovaries to get to work. If it's not sending the signal, the ovaries won't go to work. If the ovary can't respond, it could be that toxicity is blocking receptor sites. That could interfere with ovulation. And lastly, what if she is ovulating, but for whatever reason, there's no response to progesterone? There's no progesterone being produced, so there is no lining of the endometrium being formed. So I'd need to have more information before I could tell her how Ayurveda would approach it. One thing, with Ayurvedic practitioners in the U.S., we're not diagnosticians. We kind of need someone to come in and say, I'm not having, I'm under stress and that's causing me to have this no ovulation, and that I can help more specifically with. But she'd want to identify what particular causes are. The third one, there was a third question and I forgot it. So I know it was the creams and cleansing.
Yeah, it was about having, spotting or bleeding after menopause.
Spotting or bleeding after menopause. What's really funny, that has got to do with stress following menopause. And what it does is, even though you're no longer producing estrogen and progesterone at the level of the ovaries, you still have places in your body that produce these hormones. Now, for women who have after menopausal spotting, they do want to get that checked first of all to rule out any really bad condition that could be causing it. But what usually causes this is drops in progesterone, because we still continue to produce a precursor to progesterone at some glands called the adrenals. They're on top of the kidneys. When you're under stress, rather than using that progesterone to stabilize the body, it takes that progesterone and uses it to make cortisol to deal with the stress. When that happens, women go through progesterone, 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 and then the progesterone level drops. This drop in progesterone during your reproductive years is the same thing that tells you to start menstruating. So when you're in your reproductive years, your progesterone level is high. When it drops, your menstruation begins. For postmenopausal women, their progesterone level is not really high. They're not building endometrium, but it's kind of at this low level. But then when they're under stress, it drops, and that tells the body to go ahead and release anything that it's holding, and so they get some spotting, typically not a full menstrual period, but they get some spotting that occurs postmenopausally. And so then they want to go back and look at that and see, how can I reduce my stresses so that I no longer deal with this? I thought it was funny because I had experienced some postmenopausal bleeding, and I went in to see a naturopath about this to figure out why. And so I got it's really funny because this doesn't even come up in our talk, which is funny. But at the time, I came up positive for neoplastic cells or cancerous cells in the cervix. And so I went in to have all these things tested, and I started doing some different things before I went any further. And I didn't end up having cancer. But so I went back to talk to the naturopath, and I said, okay, so now we've ruled out it's not cancer. What caused this? And she told me what I just told you about this drop in progesterone. And I said, okay. And she said, so what I would do is go on to some hormones and start taking the progesterone. And I said to her, but you just told me this was caused by stress. And she said, yes. And I said, well, then I'm just going to de-stress. And she said, oh, I forgot who I was talking to. Because, I mean, it was just really funny to me because her treatment for a stress-caused condition was to put me on hormones. And I said, if it was caused by stress, I know what to do to de-stress, and I know that I wasn't sleeping well enough, I was spending too much time on the internet, I was, running 5 directions when I should only run 1. And I said, oh, I can see where I've created this stress in my life, and all I did, it was gone. It never has recurred. And it was just really funny to me. It was, again, that glimpse into, oh, you have a problem with stress, let's put you on some medication. And that could be useful in the short term, but I certainly don't want to be beholden to it. And it was just really funny because you asked about that postmenopausal bleeding, and I never even thought to mention that in our talk because but it's not a common condition, and I do believe if any woman is bleeding postmenopausally, that she does want to get that checked just to rule out uterine cancer or cervical cancer that could be behind it. But most often the causative factor is stress dropping the progesterone levels and leaving you with, kind of the mechanism that your body recognizes from your reproductive years that, oh, my progesterone levels dropped, I'm supposed to be menstruating. And because you don't have very much endometrium, it doesn't last very long, but it's good to get it checked.
Wow, time just flew by. We've come to
that's fast.
It's almost the end of an hour, but there's one important question that Steph and Julie have asked, and I apologize to all other people whose questions have not been answered. There's another session tomorrow. We'll definitely take up your concerns. We hope to see you tomorrow. But they wanted to talk a little bit about endometriosis, and they also mentioned Mirena implants. But endometriosis is a concern that if you could just talk briefly about that, and we'll come back tomorrow with more of your answers and new topics.
Yeah, no, endometriosis is tricky because, it's not, that one is a disease condition. It's not typically a typical experience that a woman with menstruation has. In endometriosis, the endometrium starts to grow into the pelvic cavity. It grows up through the fallopian tubes and out. And what's annoying about endometriosis is that there is no known cause of it. They don't know what is the mechanism which causes the endometrium to go so crazy. Whenever we, from an Ayurvedic perspective, look at something where there is no known cause, then we just back up and say, okay, which dosha would be pushing this? As soon as someone tells me it has no known cause, I look at Vata dosha and I start looking, how can we pacify Vata dosha? One aspect of Vata dosha is the downward movement that we have of the menses out of the body. And so with endometriosis, we have that downward movement is up on its head. It's going up. So we work with diet, lifestyle things that restore downward movement, that reduce stress. When I've worked with women with endometriosis, we've worked with, certainly there are things that are generally used with endometriosis like elimination of caffeine and alcohol from the diet. The caffeine and alcohol really disturb Vata dosha with too much stimulation and too much dryness. But I find working with endometriosis is you've got to work from many different directions. There are herbs to help restore that downward movement, and then there's diet that is specific to alleviating of toxins that are in the body, and then there's yoga asana and things that can be done to help work with downward movement. It's not an easy condition to work with, and I really am sorry if you're going through that because I know it's a great deal of pain that's involved with that as well. I've found that it takes time and it can be improved, but it does take time and effort to work with.
Right. Pam here wants to, she talks about reproductive infertility and unknown diagnosis, they don't know what's going on, and she asks some very poignant questions, and she says, not worth trying to get pregnant anymore? Is it a way to know it's over? Just too old? These questions, and I know for a fact that you're the best person to answer these questions, but since we're short of time, I'm just going to request Pam to watch the video after this. She might find it helpful. And I'd like to thank every single person here who's come and made the effort to attend this session, which has been very educative, I hope. At this time, I'd like to remind everybody we are going to talk about some very, very specific things tomorrow. We'll talk about breast health. We'll talk about, various symptoms we go through with disfiguration, with breast tenderness and pain. And we'll talk about vaginal health. We'll talk about dryness. We'll talk about some things which are commonly not very openly discussed, such as yeast infections and candidiasis. And these things are common, but nobody likes to talk about them. And Ayurveda has a take on these issues, which can be very useful for you. We'll also talk about some more menopausal symptoms, and we'll take up some of the concerns that we missed out today. And I'd also like to tell you a lot of the diet-related concerns, your questions about schedule for the perfect diet, your questions about what you can do for different symptoms. I just request you to please take a look at this beautiful compilation that Mary has put together herself, and you might find it helpful. So I look forward to seeing all of you tomorrow. Thank you so much, Mary. I don't know if I've thanked you enough, but we look forward to having you again tomorrow in these really helpful and interesting sessions.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure, and I've enjoyed being here this evening, and I hope you come back tomorrow with more questions.
We will. Do keep an eye out for the video now. Thank you.
Thank you.